Breaking news tonight. Prince Harry is said to be in shock. Sources in Montecito describe the Duke of Sussex as visibly rattled after learning that author Tom Bower has released new claims about Meghan's secret past. This isn't tabloid chatter, it's an investigative thunderclap reverberating through the royal sphere. According to several insiders, Bower's latest revelations don't just question Meghan's narrative, they threaten to rewrite the Sussex story itself. And the one person who never saw it coming is Harry. Tom Bower, the journalist known for dismantling billionaires and exposing politicians, has now turned his sights on the Duchess. His new findings dig deep into the years before Meghan became a royal, unearthing records, deleted images, and testimonies from people who once moved in her circle. The report suggests that behind the polished image of a humanitarian actress was a far more calculated operator, one who knew exactly how to build the myth that would charm a prince and captivate the world. Insiders tell us Harry first learned of the upcoming exposé through private correspondence forwarded by an old friend in London. The friend's message was blunt. You might want to read what Bower's uncovered before everyone else does. Within hours, the news spread across British media desks, triggering what one royal aide described as a quiet panic in California. Palace sources, meanwhile, remain tight-lipped. No denials, no clarifications, only a studied silence that feels less like protection and more like strategic distance. According to excerpts circulating among journalists, Bower's material points to a period in Toronto centered around the exclusive Soho House network. Far from the image of an actress stumbling into a fairy tale romance, Meghan is portrayed as someone who understood precisely which doors to open and which names to remember. Former acquaintances told Bower she was magnetic but meticulous, the sort who could turn casual encounters into opportunities. One producer quoted in the investigation described her as a master of controlled authenticity, a performer who knew when the cameras weren't rolling. That's when the real work began. Analysts say this could mark a turning point in how the public perceives the Sussexes. For years, the couple's brand has been built on transparency, vulnerability, and their joint claim of escaping an oppressive institution. But if Bower's evidence holds, that foundation begins to look less like liberation and more like orchestration. What we're seeing, commented royal commentator Elaine Hawkins, isn't merely a challenge to Meghan's image, it's a direct threat to the moral platform that sustains their global deals, their documentaries, their credibility. What's particularly explosive is that Buckingham Palace has chosen the path of absolute silence. In past crises, Andrew's scandal, William's rumours, the palace machinery moved swiftly to contain damage. This time, not a single statement. Insiders interpret that as deliberate. You only stay quiet, one veteran courtier confided, when speaking would tie you to a truth you can't control. That choice of silence has sent shockwaves through royal observers, fueling speculation that the palace may have known far more about Meghan's pre-royal life than the public ever realized. Meanwhile, Harry's reaction has reportedly oscillated between disbelief and dread. Close friends describe him as haunted by the possibility that parts of Meghan's story were carefully edited before he entered it. The timing couldn't be worse. With new streaming projects hinging on their shared narrative, any fracture in that image threatens millions and reputations. For viewers following this saga, the tension is palpable. Was the Duchess truly the victim she claimed to be, or the author of the most convincing royal illusion in modern history? And if Harry is only now learning the full scope of Bower's findings, what happens inside that Montecito mansion tonight? Stay with us, because the next revelation from Bower's dossier doesn't just question a marriage, it challenges the very version of truth the Sussex brand was built upon. Tonight, we move deeper into the world Tom Bower calls the hidden network, the system that shaped Meghan Markle long before she entered Windsor's gates. This is not the Hollywood glitz you've seen in glossy magazines. It's the world behind the velvet rope, where access is everything and authenticity is a performance. And, according to Bower's latest findings, This was the stage where Meghan rehearsed the role that would change her life. Not actress, not humanitarian, but future Duchess. Soho House Toronto wasn't just another upscale members club. It was an ecosystem, a social currency exchange for those who wanted to climb, to belong, to be seen. Here, celebrities rubbed shoulders with financiers, producers, and political heirs. Everything happened behind closed doors, away from cameras but under constant observation by those who mattered. Members didn't just drink cocktails, they negotiated power, traded introductions, and formed alliances. For someone as ambitious and image-savvy as Meghan, it was the perfect classroom. According to insiders Bauer interviewed, Meghan didn't stumble into Soho House. She was ushered in by Marcus Anderson, the global membership director, and one of the most connected figures in that scene. Anderson would later become a key link in her introduction to Prince Harry. Marcus opened doors no agent could, one former member recalled. If you wanted to meet the right people, you didn't go through casting directors, you went through Marcus. And once Meghan was inside, she knew how to stay there. Multiple sources describe her as gracious to the powerful, invisible to the irrelevant. She remembered birthdays, children's names, and even the preferred champagne brands of the club's top patrons. It wasn't charm, said a film executive quoted by Bauer. It was strategy. Every compliment, every laugh, every shared secret served a purpose. What makes these claims explosive is not the networking itself, everyone in show business networks, but the implication that her entire love story with Harry might have roots in this circle. Bauer's documents reportedly reveal overlapping guest lists from private events where Harry's friends and Meghan's new Toronto acquaintances first crossed paths. It wasn't coincidence. The overlap is too precise, Bauer writes. She was already orbiting the people who would one day connect her to the palace. If true, this narrative upends the fairy tale that the couple, and much of the media, have sold for years. A chance encounter, a whirlwind romance, destiny unfolding against the odds. Instead, we see a carefully plotted intersection of social worlds. Hollywood meets old money, ambition meets opportunity. And that, royal analysts say, explains why Meghan's pre-royal years have been quietly edited from official accounts. Too many questions, too many connections, notes commentator James Holt. It's easier to erase the chapter than explain it. The Toronto Soho House was famous for discretion, but it also became infamous for what it allowed. According to Bauer's report, there were after-hours circles where no photos were permitted and phones were surrendered at the door. One former staff member claimed that certain regulars had their own rules. What happened in those rooms never left. Within that shadow world, Meghan was described as both participant and gatekeeper. She wasn't just attending parties, she was shaping them. Even more intriguing are the names that appear in Bauer's files, figures with direct lines to British aristocracy and media power brokers. One source, who asked to remain anonymous, said, "There were nights when people from London's upper circles showed up unannounced. Everyone acted like it was normal, but those nights changed everything." These overlapping networks blurred the boundaries between celebrity and monarchy long before Meghan's name was known in royal briefings. Publicly, she was still the rising actress, smiling, outspoken, promoting causes about empowerment and authenticity. Privately, if Bauer's findings are accurate, she was assembling something far more deliberate, a web of alliances built not on emotion, but on leverage. She understood the cost of proximity, says a Toronto-based publicist who once worked with her team. You don't get close to power without paying something in return. Meghan just made sure others paid more. And through it all, one question haunts Harry's defenders. Did he ever know? Was he aware that the woman who seemed to appear from nowhere had already been circling the royal orbit through shared friends, private events, and whispered introductions? Or has he only now, years later, realized how many doors had been opened before he ever knocked? The deeper Bauer digs, the clearer one theme emerges. Nothing about the Sussex story happened by accident. Every connection, every narrative beat, from the humanitarian image to the royal romance, was part of a script written years before the first headline. But here's the catch. When you build your legend in secret rooms, those rooms never stay secret forever. Someone always remembers, someone always talks, and that's exactly what Tom Bower has made sure of. Next, we'll turn to the night that could have ended it all before it began. The 2016 incident insiders say was quietly erased from history. Because if that story holds any truth, it wasn't just Meghan's image that was saved, it was Harry's future too. The year was 2016, the very moment when Meghan Markle's relationship with Prince Harry was supposed to be their private secret, a fragile fairy tale unfolding out of sight. But according to Tom Bower's investigation, there was one night that nearly destroyed it all before the romance even went public. Insiders now refer to it as the Toronto incident, a night of whispered warnings, frantic phone calls, and an intervention that, if true, could have changed royal history. Multiple sources tell Bower that the event unfolded during a weekend when Meghan was still filming Suits and Harry was quietly visiting Toronto under the radar. Among the group that night were close friends from Meghan's Soho House circle, including Marcus Anderson and a few London guests whose names, for legal reasons, Bower chose not to print. The setting: a private members only afterparty. One of those no photos, no questions evenings that the club was famous for. What began as a night of champagne and laughter reportedly spiraled into something much darker. Bower's sources allege that at some point that evening, Meghan made a discreet request to acquire substances, allegedly not just for herself, but for guests, including Harry and possibly Princess Eugenie, who was said to be in town that same weekend. No one was arrested, no reports were filed, but according to those who were present, there was a sudden silence that swept through the room after a warning call from someone connected to the club's management. It was like the air got sucked out, one witness told Bower. Within minutes, phones disappeared, people left, and her name stopped being mentioned for weeks. What makes this claim more than idle gossip is the pattern that followed. Almost overnight, Meghan's appearances at Soho House became rare. Her usual social media posts from Toronto halted. Friends who had been part of her inner circle stopped being seen with her publicly. It was a clean-up operation, a former acquaintance explained. Whatever happened that night, the people around her treated it as a line that couldn't be crossed again. According to Bower's investigation, whispers about the near scandal reached as far as the UK. One palace aide allegedly confirmed that the young prince's circle had been warned to be cautious about a new acquaintance connected to the Toronto elite. The implication, Bower writes, is that the palace may have quietly intervened, not to punish Meghan, but to suppress a potential PR catastrophe before it touched the royal name. If strings were pulled, says royal commentator Lydia Harris, they were pulled from the very top. The palace has the resources to make things disappear. They've done it before. 5. That, of course, raises a disturbing question. If Meghan's entry into royal life was shielded from the start by the same institution she would later accuse of cruelty and racism, what does that make of her victim narrative? Insiders suggest that the palace's silence wasn't protection for Meghan, it was protection for Harry. They couldn't afford another scandal tied to a young royal, one source told Bower. The priority wasn't her reputation, it was the crown's. For Harry, that distinction is devastating. If Bower's findings are even partly accurate, it would mean that his relationship was born under the same cloud of media management he claimed to despise. The very system he fled might have been the one that quietly saved him. That realization, friends say, is what's been tormenting him most. He believed he was escaping control, one longtime acquaintance told The Sun. But he's learning now that control might have saved him once, and that Meghan was never the innocent outsider he imagined. Bower's reporting also uncovers what he calls the coordinated silence. Dozens of people connected to Meghan's Toronto years declined to speak on record. Many of their social media accounts vanished. Photos from events were deleted. In one case, an entire blog post referencing a private Soho house party from that same weekend was scrubbed within 24 hours of Bauer's inquiry. That kind of synchronization doesn't happen naturally, Bauer notes. It's the mark of a cleanup with purpose and power behind it. Royal watchers have seized on these findings as a possible explanation for the palace's long-standing caution toward Meghan once she joined the family. They knew too much, says Harris. They knew where the cracks were, and they were terrified that one of them would reopen. It also explains why, despite Meghan's repeated public criticisms of the monarchy, the palace has never launched an official rebuttal. You can't expose someone, one former staffer allegedly told Bauer, when exposing them would mean exposing yourself. To the public, the Sussex story was a modern romance, a prince who found love across the Atlantic and defied tradition to marry for the heart. But in Bauer's retelling, that same story looks more like crisis management disguised as destiny. Every happy headline may have been built on a night that almost became a scandal and on the powerful hands that buried it. Now, as the revelations spread, the biggest question isn't whether Meghan made mistakes in her past, it's who cleaned them up and at what cost. Because if the palace truly intervened to protect her image, it means the same institution she later denounced as her oppressor was, in fact, her first savior. And that irony, royal analysts say, is what's keeping Prince Harry awake tonight. Next, we turn to the evidence Bauer claims to have uncovered. The sealed files, the altered records, and the details so tightly hidden that even the palace seems afraid to touch them. Because if documents don't lie, then someone else has been doing plenty of it. The deeper Tom Bauer dug, the stranger the trail became. What began as whispers about a single night in Toronto soon expanded into something far more unsettling: records that don't exist, documents that vanished, and sealed files that no one can explain. According to insiders close to Bauer's research, every time he tried to verify one of Meghan Markle's background details, he hit a wall. And not a simple privacy block, an institutional barrier. It was as if parts of her history had been quietly locked away, piece by piece, until only the version she wanted remained. The first red flag appeared when Bauer attempted to access Meghan's birth records in California. For an American citizen, those files are typically public, or at least obtainable with basic authorization. But in Meghan's case, they were sealed by court order, classified under a privacy clause so strict that even accredited researchers were denied access. That kind of sealing is rare, one records officer reportedly told Bauer. You usually see that in cases of adoption, witness protection, or state-level security, not for a public figure. It didn't stop there. Bauer found inconsistencies in timelines, education details, and even early acting credits. Some appeared and disappeared from databases without explanation. It's like chasing a moving target, Bauer wrote. Every time you think you've pinned down a date, a fact, or a record, it's been modified, deleted, or rewritten. The most startling discovery came from an archived birth registry that briefly surfaced before being taken offline, listing a birth year that would make Meghan several years older than the official biography suggests. At first, that might sound trivial, just another Hollywood vanity tweak. But as Bauer points out, age affects timelines, and timelines affect credibility. A few years here or there can shift the entire narrative of a career, the perception of achievement, and the framing of a public persona. When you build your brand on relatability and late-blooming success, every year counts, commented journalist Piers Whitfield. If your origin story doesn't add up, the rest starts to wobble. Then came the royal chapter, the one the palace has tried hardest to bury. Meghan's official biography on the royal family's website once read like a glowing resume. Degrees, language fluency, humanitarian work, international charity connections. But Bauer's team documented a quiet editing campaign that stripped it bare over time. Mentions of her being fluent in French and Spanish vanished. References to certain charities disappeared. Even the timeline of her career in entertainment was shortened, leaving only a skeletal version of her public identity. Someone wanted her record clean. A former palace communications aide told Bauer. Not corrected, erased. When asked why the royal website was modified, Kensington Palace offered a vague statement about routine updates. Yet, no other royal biography underwent such drastic pruning, and no explanation was ever given for why Meghan's name on Archie's birth certificate was suddenly altered weeks after it was filed, removing her full legal name, Rachel Meghan, and replacing it with simply Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Even more curious, the Portland Hospital, long rumoured to be where Archie was born, never confirmed or denied the birth. No attending physician ever gave a statement. No hospital bulletin was issued, breaking with decades of royal tradition. The silence was deafening, said royal analyst Caroline Houghton. Every royal birth before had followed the same transparent process. Suddenly, the Sussex birth was treated like a state secret. Bauer also discovered something even more troubling. Several former staff members from the palace's communications office admitted, off the record, that parts of Meghan's dossier were flagged for inconsistency as early as 2018. But instead of clarifying them, the decision was made to quietly minimize her profile. It was damage control by deletion, one aide allegedly said. If you remove the claims, there's nothing to defend. The bigger question, though, is why? What would make the palace, an institution obsessed with documentation and protocol, risk the optics of concealment? Some observers believe it was a form of internal triage. They saw what was coming, Houghton explained. They knew Tom Bauer wasn't the only one digging. By the time the Oprah interview hit, the palace had already begun cutting ties, one line of text at a time. The strategy was simple: distance without confrontation. By refusing to defend or deny, the monarchy could avoid being caught in a future contradiction. Yet that silence, experts say, has become its own confession. When institutions redact, they reveal, Bauer remarked in a recent interview. They tell you where to look by showing you what they've erased. For Meghan and Harry, this revelation lands like a thunderclap. Their empire, built on authenticity, resilience, and speaking their truth, now faces a credibility crisis. Every missing record, every sealed file, every deleted paragraph fuels the perception that the fairy tale was scripted, not spontaneous. It's no longer just a matter of gossip, said media analyst Jonathan Gray. It's a matter of trust. And once public trust fractures, it doesn't mend. As the story unfolds, even loyal supporters are beginning to ask the forbidden question. If the official documents don't match the public story, who exactly were we watching all along? Because when the record of truth gets rewritten, the person behind it does too. And for the palace, the cost of silence may soon outweigh the price of exposure. Next, we turn to the man at the center of that reckoning, Prince Harry. Because as Bauer's findings pile up, insiders say the Duke of Sussex is beginning to see a reflection he no longer recognizes. And this time, it's not the media haunting him, it's his own reality. According to those closest to him, Prince Harry has entered a phase that insiders describe as quiet panic. In the past few months, his public appearances have changed, the forced smile, the empty eyes, the way he seems physically present but emotionally elsewhere. Those who have seen him in private say he's finally asking the questions he never dared to before. Questions about the woman he sacrificed everything for. About the stories he defended so fiercely that he burned bridges with his family to keep them alive. It began, reportedly, after Bauer's revelations landed in his inbox. He read it 3 times, said one California-based source. He didn't want to believe it, but the details were too specific. The dates, the names, the deleted records. It wasn't rumor, it was receipts. Since then, Harry has been described as withdrawn and restless, spending long nights alone in his study while Meghan continues her media commitments. Those who have worked with him notice the shift too. During a recent charity event, body language experts pointed out the tension in his jaw, the nervous hand movements, and the lack of spontaneous interaction. "He used to lead with confidence," said analyst Denise Morgan. "Now he looks like someone trying to convince himself he still believes his own story." Behind closed doors, sources claim Harry has reached out to old friends in the UK, the very people he cut off after Megxit. Not reconciliation, but cautious messages, testing whether they'd even respond. One longtime friend reportedly told him, "You don't need to apologize. You just need to stop pretending." Those words, according to insiders, hit harder than any tabloid headline. What's haunting Harry now is the possibility that his rebellion, his decision to leave the royal family, to denounce the institution, might have been built on selective truth. If the palace did protect Meghan early on, if parts of her past were deliberately hidden, then the villain he fought against might have been the one quietly saving him. "It's a psychological collapse," said Dr. Miles Kerr, a royal behavioral expert. "When your identity is built on opposition, realizing your enemy might have been your ally is devastating." Meanwhile, the couple's public partnership appears strained. Meghan's focus remains on projects, branding, and her new image as a global philanthropist. Harry, however, has grown noticeably detached from the narrative machine that once fueled both of them. "He's still defending her publicly because he has to," says one insider. But privately, he's starting to see the fractures. There's irony in all of this. The prince who fled the palace for freedom may now be discovering he's trapped in a different kind of cage, one made of image, silence, and half-truths. Friends describe him as haunted by echoes, replaying interviews, statements, and the words he once used to condemn his family. "He's realizing," says a source, "that every time he thought he was speaking truth to power, he might have been speaking from a script written for him. And yet, he remains silent, because admitting he was wrong wouldn't just mean losing credibility, it would mean losing himself. But silence, as we've learned in this saga, never lasts forever. The next move won't come from Harry, it'll come from the world watching him unravel, and from the woman beside him, who may already be preparing her next act." As the silence deepens, the Sussex fairy tale stands on the edge of collapse. What once shimmered as a love story for the modern age now trembles under the weight of revelations, sealed files, and unspoken truths. The palace remains quiet, too quiet, and Harry's isolation grows heavier by the day. Meghan continues to project control, perfectly composed before every camera, every lens. But behind that stillness, insiders whisper, is a storm gathering strength. The story she built to define herself is beginning to define her downfall. The Sussex brand was supposed to be untouchable, freedom, authenticity, rebellion. Yet every pillar of that image now faces questions. Streaming deals depend on their moral credibility. Speaking tours rely on public trust. Once those cracks widen, they can't be sealed with a carefully worded statement or a new podcast. Reputation is a currency, notes media strategist Claire Henshaw. And right now, theirs is losing value faster than it can be rebuilt. Bauer's work has done more than expose inconsistencies. It has revealed a pattern, one that royal watchers have been hinting at for years. A woman who reinvents herself at every turn, cutting ties with each past version, building a new identity from the ruins of the old. From Northwestern, to Hollywood, to the palace, to Montecito, the script is the same. Charm, ascend, and erase. That's not growth, says Henshaw. That's controlled amnesia. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood is one of studied detachment. No outrage, no defense, no rescue. Senior aides have learned a hard lesson. Distance is survival. They know the headlines will shift, one source told The Times. But they also know this isn't over. The house can outlast scandal. Individuals can't. It's a quiet, ruthless calculation. Let the Sussexes implode on their own terms, without the palace lifting a finger. And so, the curtain begins to fall. Harry stands at a crossroads. One path leads back to the family he turned his back on, the other toward the woman who may have rewritten his destiny. He's starting to see it, says one insider. The truth isn't in the headlines or the interviews, it's in the silences between them. Meghan, meanwhile, faces a reckoning of her own. When the cameras fade, when the sympathy runs dry, will she reinvent herself once again, or will the world finally stop believing? The House of Windsor has weathered abdications, affairs, and scandals that would destroy lesser dynasties. But this is different. It's not just about love or betrayal. It's about the cost of illusion in an age that demands transparency. When every secret becomes searchable, every myth collapses eventually. And when that happens, the Sussex saga won't end. It will echo, reshaping how history remembers not just them, but the institution they challenged. Because in the end, truth doesn't vanish. It waits. And as Bauer's investigation continues to unearth what others buried, one thing is certain: the reckoning has only begun. Thank you for watching and for staying with us through this investigation. If you believe the truth deserves to be told, no filters, no palace spin, then don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts below, and turn on notifications. The next chapter in this royal unraveling is coming soon, and trust us, you won't want to miss it.